Hello, everyone. My name is Nicole Harrison, and I serve as the Assistant Director for the Sitka Center for Art and Ecology. And it's my pleasure to welcome tonight's resident talk. It's our first resident talk of the season, which is always fun and exciting to kick off. Sitka is located in Cascade Head on the north central coast and resides on the unceded traditional lands of the indigenous people now represented by the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde and the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians. All right, and now it is my pleasure to introduce to you tonight's first resident talk by Steph Littlebird, who is an artist, author, curator, and enrolled member of Oregon's Grand Ronde Confederated Tribes. Steph earned her BFA in painting and printmaking from the Pacific Northwest College of Art in Portland and is currently living in Las Vegas. Littlebird is known for her vibrant graphic imagery that combines traditional styles of her indigenous ancestors with contemporary illustration aesthetics. Her work often examines issues related to Native identity, cultural resilience, and responsible land stewardship. Her first children's book, My Powerful Hair, which is incredible, by the way, was released in early 2023 in collaboration with author Carol Lindstrom and Abram Brooks. Steph has been commissioned by brands like Lucasfilms, Yahoo, Luna Bar, and featured by media outlets like PBS News, NPR, and Art News. All right, everybody, if you can, please welcome Steph Littlebird to the Sitka Center.
Thank you so much for the lovely introduction. My name is Steph Littlebird, and I am a member of the Grand Ronde Confederated Tribes. I'm specifically descendant from the Chinook and Kalapuyan tribes of Oregon, which their territory is sort of at the top of the Willamette Valley in Oregon near Portland. And I'm here out at Sitka right now enjoying my residency and just so honored to be able to share some of my work with you guys today. So I was going to share my screen just so you could see some of my work while I talk. Also, if you want to find me on social media and learn more about my work, Instagram is the best way to do that. I share my work and what I'm up to on there pretty often, and my handle on there is Art Nerd Forever, or you can just search Steph Littlebird. But much of my work revolves around Indigenous identity, and my purpose is to represent Indigenous culture, but like in a contemporary sense. A lot of the representation around Natives tends to like place us in the past, and so the work that I'm trying to do is very much related to is to like bring us into the present, because many people see us as like black and white movies, and sort of overcoming that is a real big part of the work that I do. Earlier this year, I do book covers as well as illustrate children's books and other book illustration type projects. My Star Wars book cover came out this May, which was pretty amazing for me because I'm a Star Wars nerd. And so when I got the opportunity to work with Lucasfilm on this and Penguin, I was just like elated. So pretty cool just as an Indigenous person who's a fan of the series. But yeah, also just like I think I'm one of the first Indigenous illustrators to work for them. So that's pretty neat. And also some other covers that I did as well. But the book that my very first children's book actually came out in March, My Powerful Hair, with Carol Lindstrom. And Carol wrote the book We Are Water Protectors, which was a sort of massive runaway hit when it came out. It came out during the sort of beginning of the pandemic, and people really like sort of just gravitated to it. And so this is her next book, and very excited to tell stories with other Indigenous people. That's like, I think one of my skill sets is like helping other people translate their stories. And so it's been a real honor to do these projects and work with other Native creatives. And so My Powerful Hair was a sort of unique intersection of the work that I do as an artist and also the work that I do as an educator of the community. So I do public talks about Calipoian history, but also about land acknowledgements and things like that. And along with those talks, I get into Oregon's history of Indian boarding schools. Oregon was home to the second Indian boarding school in the country, which is also the longest running because it remains open in Salem. And so I actually educate the public about the history of the boarding schools and talk about, that impact on our community now. And this book actually goes into that history in relation to Carol's own personal history and her family's experience in boarding school as well. And so it was a really an honor to actually help tell this story because it is about Indigenous history, both my own local personal history, but also like national as well as Canadian history. Boarding schools are a sort of dark secret that most people don't know about when we talk about American history. And so I thought I'd just share a couple of the illustrations from the book, which again, like I was talking about, this idea of translating contemporary indigeneity into visuality. I think a lot about color as being a way to do that, because I mentioned most people think we live in sepia tone. They don't know that we're actually real people out in the world. And so using bright colors is a way to sort of surprise people when we're talking about Indigenous people and our culture. Especially if you've ever been to a powwow, you can see that these colors are a part of our contemporary culture. Powwows are like the brightest, most sparkling experience you could ever be invited to if you're not Native. So highly recommend getting out to a Grand Ronde powwow if you've never been. But yeah, so I use color in a way to talk about our contemporary experience. And just some other some spreads from the book. We just found out that it's won some pretty cool awards that we can't talk about yet, but will be out next month. So it's pretty neat to be part of this, especially as my first children's book. I just feel like such an honor to tell the story of Indigenous experience and, working with intergenerational trauma, but also talking about the unique values of our culture. And so, it's really an honor for me to do these kinds of projects and get to help tell these stories. So anyway, I think that's about all. Oh, I should say what I'm doing here at Sitka is I'm actually working on a book for Grand Ronde, and it's going to be my first book that I've written, but also fully illustrating it. And it's going to tell the creation story of Willamette Falls, which, if you don't know, is second only to Niagara Falls in the country. So Oregon has the second most powerful waterfall in the US, and our tribal community at Grand Ronde is actually working to rehabilitate the land so that the public as well as Indigenous people can enjoy it again. And so I am illustrating the creation story, which is a coyote story, and I'm so excited. So that's what I am cooking up while I'm here at Sitka. So anyway, I just want to say thanks again, and yeah.
Thank you, Steph. If anyone has any follow-up questions, go ahead and pop them in chat. I just want to reiterate that Steph Littlebird was one of, I believe, 5 fellows that were selected this year through the Indigenous Peoples Placekeeping Artist Fellowship, which is through the Grand Ronde tribe. So Tielin was born in 1996 in Chongqing, China. Tielin is a wanderer, observer, and mixed media artist whose diverse practice involves working with playful objects, intermediate traces, and movements to create performative actions. His application of mapping and walking gives him more opportunity to reflect on invisible systems within urban and natural spaces. Under the practice of wayfinding, mark making, and game changing, he has been very interested in drifting in the field of language and space, risking getting lost from point A to B. He studied architecture engineering at Beijing University of Civil Engineering and Architecture for his bachelor's and an MFA in photography at Parsons School of Design. The New School in New York. He has been showing his works recently at Silvermine Gallery in Connecticut, Garrison Art Center in New York, Noordericht International Photo Festival in Netherlands, and recent residency attended includes Abbott Watts Photography Residency at Monson Arts in Maine, NARS Foundation Satellite Residency at Governor's Island, Ellis Burgard, and residency in Maine. All right, please join me in a warm welcome for Tielin Dean.
Thank you so much, Nicola. Thanks everyone for coming today, and it's my pleasure to be here to share my creative practice as a wanderer and inspired by wandering and observation. I consider my work as process-oriented, and a lot of times my creative practice is inspired by like the amazement by getting lost in a maze, or astonishment by knocked by a stone when I was wandering around. And some of other works are inspired by my memory. And there is always a quote resonant to me very much: chance favored prepared mind. That happens a lot when I was wandering and encounters with my surrounding environment. And next, I'm sharing some slides from my wandering experience. Besides those very observational and direct photographs, I'm also thinking a lot about like formal connection between diptych, triptych, and thinking about the formal connection across different mediums, and sometimes placing objects and playing around with scale and material, and situate the objects in different contexts in different places. And thinking about the tension between the form, material, and the sound. And after posing these objects in different positions, I have been also very much thinking about the word composition, and thinking of posing and composing objects in different positions across different size, different color, and different volume. And like in this photograph, I cut out the match heads and map out on an abandoned marble. And I compose these three images as site-specific temporal installation. And I choose photography as a medium to capture these temporal installation works. And this is a project I was thinking about the trail markers, since trail marker is a kind of object material to guide hikers which direction to go and where to go, and different juxtaposition of trail markers suggest different meaning. So in this project, I have been playing around the trail markers in different scale and different material, and the situate and composing in different environment. And I thought about the trail with directional markers and signifiers in this project as a metaphor of psycholinguistic structure of entrance, body, and exit. And this fellow installation piece with images and also found objects and materials. And this is an authoritative version of thinking about this kind of meandering markers, and incorporate branches, latex paint, and sticky notes I was thinking about the trail mapped out with trail markers in the woods. It's just like how a story is told words by words, or how a tree is growing from branches to branches. And this project, I was thinking using the burned branch from bonfire and perform and draw it on the wall. And still thinking about this kind of mapped trail from A to B inside a mountain, and also the concept of desire path in this project. And here I was also mapping and working conceptually with traffic stick from the urban environment with this specific pattern and color and composition. So besides the vehicles of wandering, walking, I have been also thinking about other vehicles of transportations, and also playing around the word between transportation, transformation, and transmutation, such as the truck. I was thinking the facade of the truck as the space, as a platform to invite more gestures to intervention and interact. Making some scratches on metallic print. And until I was very struck by this quote from John Cage, it's a concrete poetry book from Black Mountain College, and John Cage was asking on a truck passing by a music school or factory, which is more musical. So I started to situate myself as a truck, or as a to think about my identity as a wanderer, with a risk in mind as an international citizen. So it's thinking about this image of passing by like abandoned concrete mixer, cane flower, cone flower, and waterfall, and ferry, and mapped out these images under the cone-shaped cloud after a thunderstorm, traversing different urban landscape, and with the gravel spreading out from the truck. So after that, I have been like mapping out these images with different size, different scale, and also situate at a site-specific environment with design element of yellow, which I think is a metaphor of the road as suggesting a sense of continuation and separation. And in this project, there is a fun image, and I was also playing around the word turntable, and it both suggesting rotating platform, and also it's actually common as in Chinese restaurant to think about my identity and which direction to go. So I print this image at the back of the shirt. And this is some drawing-based work. In this project, this one is called Window Shielding Wiper Inside the Mind. And keys are moving, they generate moving keys. And besides those works, I have been also thinking, situating my photograph in different sites, and whether it's public installation or interior space, or even as a postcard. So I just quickly go through these images. And it's at the subway station or facade of the building. Or the shirt, thinking of a shirt at the site, or truck at the site, or mailbox So I printed this image on aluminum with 4 inches by 6 inches as a postcard. This is my last slide. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tielin. Emily Cisco shared, what I like about your work is it can be really turned into a way of thinking, mindset, or a way of walking through the world. It can carry with the viewer in their ability to notice things, and for us all to look less at the phone while waiting for something, sitting, writing in a train while out in the world. All right. Our next guest is Elizabeth Malaska. She is from Portland. She earned her BFA from California College of Arts and her MFA in Visual Studies from Pacific Northwest College of Art. She is a 2021 Guggenheim Fellow, as well as the recipient of Painters and Sculptors Grant from the Joan Mitchell Foundation and the Hallie Ford Fellowship from Ford Family Foundation. Malaska's work is in the permanent collection at the Portland Art Museum, the Schneider Museum of Art, and the Hallie Ford Museum. Her work has been featured in Ms. Magazine, Art in America, Art Forum, and Art Maze, among others. She is represented by Wilding Cran, Los Angeles, and Rusu Lee in Portland, Oregon. The artist lives and works in Portland. Please join us in giving Elizabeth a warm welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay? So I am a painter and I make pretty big paintings. This, if you look at the scale of this, is 10 feet wide. So it gives you a sense. The figure is bigger than life size. And I have really been focused on, making large scale figurative paintings for many years now. And my work also incorporates and is deeply in dialogue with art historical painting, as well as mythologies. And by mythologies, I mean both sort of discrete mythologies, like Greek mythology, for example, but also a larger sense of what is the story that a culture, a society, a time period is telling itself. So in that sense, I think about mythology as a very contemporary experience. We're in the midst of a deeply fraught mythology at this time in our history, socially, and in our relationship to the planet and politically. And so, historical mythologies and contemporary mythologies are something that I seek to join together in my work, in the context of the history of painting. And in terms of my sort of the things that I draw from and inspire me, this is a spread from a recent catalog that was published, and it's a bringing together of different images that sit on the wall of my studio. Some of them are still there now. They cycle through, and you can see there are paintings, things from just everyday, magazines, fashion magazines, things from social media, all different sorts of things, and the history of craft, textiles, writing, architectural and interior design. And these things converge in my studio and in my mind, and I seek to bring them together in conversation on the canvas. Another thing that has been latent in my work for a long time and is really coming more into the center of my work is the animal and both the relationship of the animal to the human, animal as a metaphor, animals as guardians, as mythological figures, as wisdom keepers, as magical beings, but also I'm very invested in and very interested in animals in themselves, and also thinking about extinction and climate change and these exceptional creatures that we live amongst, that we are in the process of pushing out of, you know, viable existence. And so there's definitely a sense of grief and memorialization mixed in with my love of and admiration of animals. This piece and the first piece and the subsequent two pieces are from a recent, my most recent body of work. And where I'm at this moment, being here at Sitka, I tend to work in these sort of big bodies of work, large pieces that are very labor intensive and take me many months, a half a year, most of a year to create. And then I take a little breath and then I dive into the next group of work. So I just have completed a body of paintings that will show at the Seattle Art Museum. I was the recipient of the 2022 Betty Bowen Award, and I'm just about to exhibit the paintings that I made for that exhibition. And so literally Friday, I finished the last bit of the last painting. I ran around doing a bunch of things that needed to be done Saturday and arrived at Sitka on Sunday. So I'm sort of just in that in-between period where I take a breath and kind of process everything that has happened in my studio in the last 6 months. And here at Sitka, I am I'm fortunate to be here. This place is amazing. Thank you, Sitka, for existing and for everything that you do. And I have the incredible opportunity to work with Julia DeMario, the master printmaker, as the Jordan Schnitzer printmaking resident here for a week. And Julia is very astutely and gently indoctrinating me into the incredible world of copperplate etching and the myriad processes that are available through that medium. And so I'm really just playing in the studio. This is another piece from the body of work before this most recent one. And I'm kind of rushing through these because I want to get to, in addition to the large labor-intensive paintings I make, I work a lot on paper as a way to develop ideas, to play, to generate composition, to figure out formal elements, to experiment with color. And so when I applied for the printmaking residency, it was really adjacent to my love of and relationship to working on paper. And of course, printmaking is very related to drawing, but it's also incredibly distinct. And so I'm navigating that space where I am approaching a medium and process that is both has some familiar elements and some unfamiliar elements. And in that space where I'm just at the end of a really big project, entering into sort of the space the little space in between projects, that is often a generative space for me. I'm thinking about the next body of work, and I already have some themes and some interests that I am beginning to explore. And I brought with me here a little stack of books. These are two of them, Donna Haraway's Staying with the Trouble, Making Kin in the Cthulhu Scene, and Robin Cost Lewis, To the Realization of Perfect Helplessness, which I wasn't planning to bring. A friend gave this to me as I was leaving town. He said, "Oh, this would be a wonderful thing for you to ponder over while you are at Sitka." And it truly is. It's a book of poetry, but it is the whole poem, which is rather the whole book is one poem that is also essays that are in relationship to an archive that Robin found under her grandmother's bed of family photographs. And so she's delving into thinking about her family and her ancestors and their migration from the South to LA. And she's also thinking about a historical Black explorer who went into the Arctic. And I know I'm running up against my time here, but I will just say I'm going to throw into the chat an interview with Jory Graham on the Tin House podcast, Between the Covers, that I am in the process of listening to, that is under the aegis of the publication of her book Runaway, and it is really blowing my mind. So these are sort of where my brain is at the moment. And thank you again, everyone.
Thanks, Elizabeth. One of our attendees wants to know, what is Flash, which was listed in your medium descriptions?
Yeah, Flash is just a vinyl acrylic paint that's very matte. So it's just acrylic paint.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing everything.
Thank you.
All right. For our next presenter, Jin Lee is a Chicago-based photographer whose projects center on forming deeper relationships to places through close examination of landscape and built environments. She has received John Simon Guggenheim Fellowship and the Illinois Arts Council grant, and her works are included in the permanent collection of the Art Institute of Chicago, Museum of Contemporary Photography, Harvard Art Museum, and Los Angeles County Museum of Art. She received a MFA in photography from the School of Fine Arts, the Fine Art Institute of Chicago, and is a professor of art at Illinois State University. Take us to the clouds, Jen.
Thank you. As a photographer whose work centers on exploration of places, I'm very grateful and excited to be in this extraordinary landscape. It's a new landscape for me. So I'm learning a lot during my time here. Okay, for the past 20 years, I've been photographing the landscape of Illinois to explore how we experience a place and the way it structures our thoughts and sense of belonging. Prairie Series is a photographic study of prairie plants in different stages of their seasonal cycles, documenting the rich diversity of Illinois' native plants. This is a spring prairie. On the left is summer prairie, on the right is winter prairie. Described as North America's characteristic landscape, a prairie landscape has been likened to the ocean in its immensity, multiplicity, endless variety, and contemplative moods. I wanted to make photographs of the prairie plants that are precise and accurate in the tradition of scientific illustrations. Like the artists of botanical drawings from the past, my goal was to gather physical description of the natural world that can lead to a sense of discovery and wonder. So I wanted to show a couple of my inspirations. This beautiful watercolor by Durer, which I think looks really very much like one of my spring prairie photograph. And this multi-screen painting from Japan Edo period, which is both a celebration and a meditation on the transience of fleeting beauty. After working with prairie plants for a number of years, it has led to my interest in plants and specifically looking at wild plants around the city. Weed Series is a collection of portraits of wild plants that grow in alleys and empty lots, whose resilience and poignant beauty I admire. I'm interested in drawing attention to ordinary scenes and moments that are ephemeral yet persistent. Photograph against white walls, I think of the photograph as both portraits and still life, plants arranged with other objects, bottles, pieces of trash, plastic, feather. This is a series of photographs that I made of weed plants where I pull them out of the ground and place them against light-sensitive photo paper and expose them to light. I wanted to show the entirety of the plan and their scale. And I'm also interested in how these plants reference Asian ink drawings, paintings as well. In Salt Mountain series, it's a series of photographs of piles and mounds of salt found around storage sites in Chicago. They're used for winter snow removal, shaped by human use as well as elements of time and weather. The project also explores the ambiguity of scale in photographs, as well as a sense of accelerated geologic time in the miniature mountain form. I started the series after I spent 3 weeks at the UCross Foundation residency in Wyoming. When I came back to Illinois, I had these dreams of the mountain forms. And then I started seeing these mountain shapes around me, which elicit the same sense of awe and wonder. The series is also a study in materiality of salt and the photography's ability to describe its texture, color, and shape. The series engages with the basic language of photography, framing, perspective, composition, lighting, and the photography's ability to create its own world. I'm interested in working with heroic and sublime subjects of landscape art, but exploring them in everyday environments and seeing with subjective and intimate view. Great Waters is a series of photographs of Lake Michigan made from a single location on the south side of Chicago. Lake Michigan is an inland sea, an immense body of water with its own weather and seasonal patterns. The series is an ongoing study of the effects of seasons, weather, and light condition on the water and the sky. The project is a meditation on cycles of change and passage of time through a single-minded exploration of a place. The photograph studies the ephemeral beauty of materials and conditions that are in constant state of transformation, therefore cannot be revealed in a single viewing moment. I also started to think of these photographs as kind of interior landscape, a state of mind, or different kinds of moods. So the lake is in constant state of change. These two photographs were taken only seconds apart after the sun went behind the clouds, kind of reversing the shadow on the water. The title of the series, Great Water, comes from Ojibwe word Mishigami, meaning great water. So it's really interesting for me to be here near the ocean and thinking about the difference between the lake and the ocean. I feel like I'm still learning how to see the sea and its sense of immensity. The train view is a series of photographs made during my weekly 2-hour Amtrak commute between Chicago and Bloomington Normal, Illinois, where I teach. The photographs record the beauty of the Midwest landscape in changing seasons and weather, and the ways in which the land is used and developed, revealing scenes and moments that are alternatively beautiful, bleak, and poignant. Made from the rhythm and cycles of work and rail schedule, the series explores the way speed and movement of the train creates a dynamic perception of the landscape. The view out of the train window includes rivers, bridges, highways, housing developments, junkyard, graffiti, self-storage units, billboards, oil refinery, grain silo, wind farm, cemeteries. And this is Joliet old prison tower and the limestone quarry where the prisoners once worked. So on the left, so I see same thing every time I ride the train twice a week, and yet the view is never the same. This is Sitka refinery, cemetery, night views. The series also includes scenes inside the train of other passengers and books read during the 150-mile journey, alternating between the outside and the inside world. By paying attention to and photographing certain things over and over again, my goal is to make pictures that are precise and accurate in the tradition of documentary photographs, but at the same time create a parallel dreamlike world of images of complex moods. And this is an Illinois landscape in winter. I hope to contribute to photography's rich history in revealing the changing American social and natural landscape, and to engage in critical reflection of our present moment. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. All right. Our next guest is another Jordan Snitcher printmaking resident. Her name is Laura Ahola. She currently resides in Pocatello, Idaho, where she actually is now because she just completed her residency here. She is a professor of art, drawing, and painting at Idaho State University. She received her MFA from San Jose State University and BFA from Minneapolis College of Art and Design. Originally from northern Minnesota, Laura has been influenced by landscapes, winters, ice, and resilience. She is currently developing work that incorporates scientific research, critical plant studies, and personal narrative. Please join us in making some joyful noise wherever you are to welcome Laura to Sitka.
Thank you. I'm not supposed to thank Sitka, but I have so much to be thankful for, and especially to Julia DeMario. So I was the first, I think, 1 week printmaking resident, which I think I will talk about at the end. And I felt like I was gone for a year, and I changed a lot in just 1 week. I'm just going to sort of take you through my work since the COVID epidemic to where I am now and how I got there. During COVID, I went to the Minneapolis College of Art and Design. I lived blocks away from where George Floyd was killed. I was also forced to teach, and everyone was talking about breathing. And at the time, I was doing a whole series of shag carpet paintings because I was being snarky about how to make America great again. And I was thinking about home and place and that what that meant to me. I had also just turned 50 years old and was looking at a lot of things in our culture and in our environment that had not changed in 50 years. As you can see, my work is full of meticulous mark making. And I went from shags to sort of playing a little bit with symmetry and plants. And I was awarded a sabbatical from my institution. And we were still at the end of the sabbatical, and I decided rather randomly, but not randomly, that I needed to know a lot more about algae. So I had been reading about copper mining, which they were proposing to do in the boundary waters of northern Minnesota, where I am from, and where my family is from, and where my grandfather was a miner. They mined taconite or iron ore. And in reading about geology, I discovered the Great Oxidation Event, where it was the first mass extinction on the planet. And it was because cyanobacteria provided oxygen to us. And that kind of shut down everything I was doing and thinking, what exactly is oxygen? And what in the world is carbon? And so I set off on a mission and emailed blindly a bunch of phycologists, so algae specialists, to see if they could teach me the origin of oxygen, photosynthesis, and carbon. And during my sabbatical, I was all set to do all of this about algae. And I had a residency out of Art Ayatana in Canada, and it was a plant residency. And I realized right then and there, I was in big trouble because the love of my life is plants, and algae was such a vast field, I wasn't quite sure how to continue. Both of these two pieces are in relation to the facts and information I found out about oxygen and the off-gassing of oxygen and what it means to breathe. I did a lot of studies of specific algae plants and played with the symmetry sort of the entire time I was working on these pieces. At the time, I lived in northern Minnesota in a remodeled 1968 Shasta travel trailer. That was 84 square feet, and I had an ice house that was even smaller. That was my studio. So I had to be very methodical about what I was working on and what I was doing. So each of the algae series is really backed by science. And I have found in my practice that working with scientists is a really exciting thing to do. And they speak an entirely different language. And unpacking their complicated research became sort of a mission of mine on how to take these publications they made and translate them through an image. At the time, I became obsessed with this plant called, it's Monotropa uniflora, so the ghost plant. The whole entire summer I was on sabbatical. My mission was to track down and find the ghost plant, because at the time, seeing one in the woods was a little bit unusual. And I studied everything I could about it. It is a parasitic plant that photosynthesizes, and it lives off of fungi in the ground, and it steals the sugars. And each one of these images that I created, I reached out to the scientist, the microscope, wherever I found a microscopic image of that plant, I reached out to the scientist to ask him if I could use their permission, if they could explain what I was looking at. And so each one of these pieces, each one of these drawings is from communication with a particular scientist who was studying this plant. And this was on a mission I am still sort of working on, in that I want to use my work as a way to sort of democratize plant science. So I did a series of textiles that I eventually am going to put out there in the world so anybody can order them. And I have books and books and books that I've written with all the details of all the science that is backed by this. This is actually from a drawing I did in the fall when I was a resident at the Denver Botanical Gardens, where I got to work with their on-site scientists too. And that sort of takes me up to where I am today. During that sabbatical, it was the first time in my career as an artist that I just got to be an artist. My children were adults and I had no students. And so I got to just paint every single day, draw every single day, and geek out on reading science. And it was really hard to come back to my normal life. But I had to come back and I had to kind of invent what I was doing. I was sort of done with the algae series, and with the shag pieces, there's a part of me that felt like I was turning my back on humanity. I didn't want to really deal with human beings anymore. The sabbatical didn't help. Politically, I was disgusted. I didn't want to make anything pretty. I was wishing I could just go back and be part of the Dada movement. And then I discovered the field of critical plant studies. And anytime I do make work, I'm asking a lot of questions. I'm asking a lot of questions about the science and about reality. And I became enamored with all of the fallen trees that I would find on the trails in the boundary water system. And started talking to people who spent a lot of time outdoors and realized that the biggest sign of climate change at the time was fallen trees, that they're sitting on very thin amounts of soil on the bedrock, and they were everywhere, and they became monuments, and they became the things I remembered from my hikes. So I developed this whole series of sort of fallen tree pieces, still incorporating my meticulous mark making. But I got in a huge argument with my father. My father at the time started hearing nursery rhymes in his head, and he was trying to figure out what is sound. And so he kept saying this thing about, well, if a tree falls in the forest, nobody could hear it. And I was arguing with him, no, Dad, plants can sense things. And we were talking in two different entire worlds. Like he could not really come to grips with plants. During this time, I came across the philosopher Michael Martyr, who asked this kind of radical question that stopped me in my tracks. But he asked what rights we have as human beings in representing plants in our work and in our writing, in our humanity. And that kind of stopped me for a couple, longer than I want to admit, because all I wanted to do was draw and paint plants. So I decided, well, I'll go with these fallen trees. I will do dead plants. While I was at Sitka, I was in that library every night in the ecology part, which it was really hard to be there because I would look at the art and the ecology and I couldn't make a choice. But I found a beautiful book called Hidden Forests about the Andrews Experiment Station. And I would go at night and read everything I could. And there were whole sections of the book about the amount of life that is in a fallen tree as compared to the forest, and how the trees there regenerate the forest, and all this new science that I had not accessed yet. And every day I would run into the printmaking studio and share a little bit with Julia about what I learned. And sometimes when I read science, I get a little bit caught up in, I don't understand that. I have to understand that more. Is drawing it enough? I mean, just finding out that the stomata on one evergreen needle on a Sitka tree are completely in a very straight parallel line. Like, I want to know why. What I have discovered is finding out why takes months to work with a scientist to find out. So this is my last image here. This is my largest piece. What I learned at Sitka, because I had a week, is that my part of my practice is always putting something aside, walking away from it. If I'm frustrated, I can always come back to it. And all of a sudden I had a week to make something, even though it was clear that there wasn't expectations on me to finish a piece that quickly. I really wanted to. I had always wanted to do copper etching. So that kind of deadline was really good for me. And since I've come back, I've sort of changed up my process a little bit and given myself more deadlines and starting more work. Of course, I don't have the gentle and kind Julia at my side, but anytime you want to come, Julia, please do. So my work now is I'm still doing some fallen tree pieces, but I'm looking into the science of some particular plants, and I'm going to stop there. Thank you.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Laura.
Yeah.
From what I witnessed in the visits I was able to have, you definitely captured your normal practice into that 1 week experience in copper plate etching.
It was a blast.
Good. All right. We are moving along to Joe Scott, our last presenter, who is also an IPCA fellow. He is a member of the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, a descendant of the Rogue River tribe and what is now southwestern Oregon. He currently lives and works in Kalapuya as director of the Traditional Ecological Inquiry Program, collaborating with regional land stewards to support tribal environmental engagements, promote food sovereignty, and explore traditional ways of knowing. Focus on indigenous ecological science and traditional fire. He is a fire practitioner, cultural ecologist, traditional artist, and a lifelong tribal teacher and learner. As an artistic craft person, Joe draws inspiration from oak trees, which I wish could live this close to the ocean, but it's too hard for them. Ceremony, quality tools, and fire at night. Joe works with materials found in healthy, abundant ecosystems, often shaped by human people working with fire in ways that make balance and beauty. The grace and beauty of traditional tending practice on the land is found in the co-evolved and fire-adapted objects, songs, stories, and ceremonies shared among the people since time began. Taking this abundance in hand, Joe works to give grace and beauty back to the land in ways that honor and celebrate a living landscape. Please make some noise wherever you are and welcome Joe Scott. Thank you.
Hello, Joe Scott Wamnashi. Hello, my name is Joe Scott. It's a pleasure to be here at Sitka Center in the company of all these. Mom calls it a tough act to follow. Like really, just amazing group of diverse and talented artists. It's an honor and a privilege to share space here with folks. Humbled, but yeah, here I am as an Indigenous placekeeping artist fellow. Shout out to David Harrelson from the Grand Ronde tribe for really, I think, believing in what I proposed, and IPKA fellow. I love this, Sanchan. It means a lot of sticks. My wife says that really my work is about taking sticks and making them into different sticks or smaller sticks. So I work a lot with sticks, it's true, mostly fire adapted sticks. So that's really what I'm doing now here, and I'll share a little more about what that means. It's, I think, important to have some context for all of this, and I always will take an opportunity to share a little bit about the tribal history of where we live here. Where I live and work is what is now called the Willamette Valley, Kalapuya, the homeland of the Kalapuya people. And I think it's important to recognize that the land that we live on there is a really compromised landscape at the, when cultural fire, when the human people were taken off of the land there, a generation after generations long process came to an end, and settler colonial society took over. And all of that abundance and beauty very quickly fell victim to the plow and to railroads and highways in this unsustainable way. And I'm really working to sort of revisit our roots in that co-evolved ecology that produces materials for all these beautiful things, the stories, the songs, the objects themselves. So these are pictures of the Willamette Valley before, the early days of contact. And through burning, through cultural fire, it was great big oak savanna, rolling grasslands full of delicious foods and and all the sticks a guy like me could ever want. It's important, I think, to recognize too that we're displaced people. My ancestors are from the Rogue Valley. And people will say ceded lands, gave up our homeland. What we gave up is ecologies, these ecologies that we have and had deep, lifelong, intergenerational connections to, frequently through tending with fire. And so there's a lot of work going on now to really retrace those steps back to our homelands and put that fire back in the environment and restore that ecology. Ecological restoration and food sovereignty as an expression of art, that's kind of where I am right now. So indigenous fire science is pretty amazing. We're co-evolved. Indigenous people are co-evolved with these ecologies that create this amazing understanding of the function and form of all the things, all the living things. Oak trees are just a perfect example. I love oak trees, but through work with fire over generation after generation, oak trees have really been created and evolved with the people to provide all of these abundant things, whether it's acorns or tools or dyes or materials for clothing, food, shelter. Oak trees are amazing. And our indigenous ancestors recognize patterns in nature after generation of observation and participation, to the point where, understanding something like the acorn weevil meant knowing exactly what day to burn to, interrupt that life cycle and produce a more abundant crop of acorns. So yeah, that hence the inspiration by oak trees. Community coming together is a beautiful thing. And here's actually some fire at night. I work with youth a lot, and who are also exploring this understanding of fire ecology and restoration of our food and materials. So this is these are some pictures of us working at night with some oak trees. This is there's a picture there. By the way, slideshows like this are meant to keep me on track. Sometimes they do, sometimes I go off down the rabbit hole with one of the pictures, so just bear with me. Right, so that's a huge oak tree that's entrapped by a forest around it. Fir trees have overtaken the landscape in a way that just chokes those beautiful oak trees. And so the work of putting fire is the work of revealing and restoring these hidden places that have all overgrown after 150, 175 years of settler colonial fire suppression. This is one of the reasons why oak trees are so incredibly important to us, and why their status as a co-evolved being matters. Oak trees sustain through acorns many things, whether it's those acorn weevils I was talking about, or my favorite, pileated woodpeckers. And pileated woodpeckers, they literally carry fire around on their head like a hat. And so they're one of the first animals before the human people were created and put on the land. Woodpeckers were here, and woodpeckers provide that little glint of fire. And now in our ceremonies and our ceremonial regalia, the little scalps off of lots and lots of woodpeckers go into those hats called a tet. And so there you go. Fire ends up this incredibly important element when restoring ceremony, when restoring the songs that go with ceremony, when recreating these ceremonial objects. Fire is at the heart of it. Hazel is another one. So hazel really forms the foundation of a lot of Silet's basketry, a lot of the basketry of what is now Southwestern Oregon, Northern California, and supporting our weavers is something that fire does. These plants here, it's hazel that's all overgrown. Hazel gets burned off and it produces really beautiful, long, straight sticks, which matters. Like, it matters to our weavers to have this kind of high quality material and not have pesticides. They're putting the sticks in their mouth. So, restoring the landscape through fire, restoring these materials for these tools and supplies that have incredible artistic components. There's bear grass down there too. Picture of that. It needs fire. You can see that bear grass is all overgrown. Fire, take right care of that. It's used for overlay on the baskets. Here's some of those sticks I'm talking about. Like, that's my job, is to make those sticks for the weavers. I can't weave. I'm not a great weaver at all, but I do know how to burn things, and I know how to make those sticks with fire. And this is just an example of how important fire ecology is to our ceremonial practice. Again, revisiting that. The caps, those are caps, and they're part of the Nadash ceremony, the jump dance, the brush dance, the deerskin dance. So all of these dances honor the creator and ask for another generation of abundance. And without the right materials, without the fire, we can't make these things. We can't make that appeal to the creator in a good way. We need these things. And that the little basket, the other one is called a gayu. It's a baby basket. And so again, the way that those sticks exist in the world is engineered. Those sticks are engineered through that intergenerational understanding of how fire and ecology work together. They float right. The way the stick is, the cells in the stick are affected by the fire. And understanding that process is a very intricate thing. Same with cordage, right? Iris plants need fire. Burning iris plants off causes them to grow beautiful, strong leaves. The little fibers that come out of those leaves make cordage. Cordage is absolutely vital for a healthy society. You need cordage for fishnets. You need cordage for all kinds of things, for clothing, for sewing. Important to have fire there. And this is a really good example of what Nadash, a line of dancers, looks like. And every single one of the things that we're wearing there at its heart is about fire ecology. And this is one of my personal projects right now. And it's what I'm doing here is I'm working on what's called Indian cards. It's a deck of sticks. I actually found one in my car. There are tiny, tiny little sticks. It takes hours to make one of those little sticks. Little whittling, little thinking about the sticks. They're for gambling. So you're putting all your gambling energy into those little sticks, whittle, whittle, whittle. The way you get those sticks in a good way for making those gamble decks is by burning the plants. And there I am with my friend Chris, and we've burned off a big ocean spray patch. And I'm going to go back in a year, and there'll be a nice abundant crop of sticks for me to make a bigger gamble deck. I also just love the beauty of the materials I get to work with. On the left there is, well, it's dried elk poop and then charcoal from a specific kind of fire that makes the best charcoal, and then filtered ponderosa pine pitch. And those three things mixed together make an adhesive. Again, all of these things are fire adapted plants. And this is where I am. This is where I've landed with a lot of this work right now, is working with and understanding all of these materials and bringing them together in the objects that are used for ceremonial fire. These are ceremonial fire starters, and it's come to that. All kind of come together in this moment. There's some of that adhesive. It's that black stuff on the one drill. And all of these things, they're hazel sticks that have been straightened with fire. They're fire hardened. The hearth is the part that you put the drill in. Those are a certain kind of cedar wood and a certain kind of redwood. The drill tip itself is fire hardened grape wood, which is achieved through a certain kind of fire, a certain kind of burning in a certain area of the forest. So it's that, attention to detail that makes the difference between life and death for people. And I just, one last story and I'll stop, but this is the lightning tree. It's a great story. I was looking for this fire. Where am I going to find fire to start this project, the Indigenous Placekeeping Artist Project? Like, where's the fire coming from? How do I start fire? My wrists are bad. I have arthritis. Like, how am I ever going to do this? And then lightning struck a tree right by my house, and it burned it from bottom to top and top to bottom. It fell down, and for 2 months it smoldered under the ground. That whole time I'm like, where am I going to find the fire? I went and knocked on the guy's door. I'm like, can I have the fire out of that stump? Do you mind? So he let me go jump down in there, and I filled a bucket with fire, and I've kept a candle going ever since. And I have to, shout out to my wife, who's been making these lovely beeswax candles to keep that flame going for almost 6 months now. So I got to take some of that fire up to Upper Table Rock, which is a sacred place for us. And I played my drum for the eclipse and sang back the sun. So that's how important all of these things are, right? Adding the songs, adding back in the ceremony, using fire as a foundational element. So le'an means the end, and fire itself, you just got to know, fire is beautiful. So that's me celebrating fire, working with fire. That's all. Le'an.
Thank you, Joe. That was incredible. You have a wealth of knowledge, and I have so many questions, but it would probably take a whole another hour of everyone's time to get through them. Thank you for sharing that. I love that that was the beginning of your fellowship. Where am I going to get the fire? And then lightning strikes the tree. That's the way things work, right? Incredible. Well, thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for everyone that presented. Have a good night.